Welcome everybody to the MaCCI EPOS Fireside Talk. Today's topic, artificial intelligence and economics. We still do this conversation with a real person. Let's see whether in the future we could do that kind of conversation with some kind of AI-based system. But I think at this point, there's nothing better than having Joshua Gans as the person to talk to. Let me quickly introduce Joshua. Joshua is professor of strategic management, and he holds the Jeffrey S. Skoll Chair of Technical Innovation Entrepreneurship at the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto, and has a cross appointment at the Econ department. Joshua is chief economist of the Creative Destruction Lab at the University of Toronto. As a background, Joshua did his PhD at Stanford and holds an honors degree in economics from the University of Queensland. And for those who don't know, that's a bit further away. That's in Australia. Joshua, I think AI, I mean, that's a topic we are more recently interested about. If one looks at your output, I'm wondering whether you have been using AI all the time since for decades. Joshua is doing a lot of things as an academic and doing things which are perhaps most academics don't do. Among others, he's writing lots of books, or he has AI writing his books. And in particular regarding AI, so there are two nice books out there. Let me hold one of them. One is called Prediction Machines, The Simple Economics of Artificial Intelligence, co-authored with AI Agrawal and Avi Goldfarb, and with the same co-authors, another book also covering AI, Power and Prediction, The Disruptive Economics of Artificial Intelligence. And well, if that's not enough, there's also another edited book out there, which is called The Economics of Artificial Intelligence, which is with the same co-editors as are the authors. Now, starting with artificial intelligence, I guess some of the economists are now waking up and think, well, what is it about? And perhaps to start with, Joshua, you could give us some definition of AI which serves to the amateur observer. And from an economics perspective, really, I mean, what's new? I mean, what's different?
There are many definitions of AI, but if we talk about it, the current wave of progress of what comes under that label, the label is very misleading, and in fact is just an advance in computational statistics, nothing more than that. It's in other words something extremely familiar to economists, just various variants on logistic regression, ultimately, and moreover not sophisticated in some sort of causal way. These are correlations, and what they basically enable is better, faster, and cheaper. And predictions basically, broadly construed is, taking the information that you do have and processing it into the information that you need or want to use. It's a statistical process at its heart. It's been enabled because we have much better computers than we did previously. That's allowed this to occur. So from the point of view of economics, nothing's changed. There's barely an innovation from an economist's point of view in terms of what we already knew, in terms of methods. It is instead a dramatic decrease in the cost of producing predictions. And moreover, in many instances, our ability to predict is surprisingly high. But other than that, nothing new here.
That's always good to hear. So that means we can hopefully use some of the things we think we know and to analyze this as economists. But kind of to put it in perspective, and you have been thinking and writing a lot about innovation and technological progress. And of course, there have been many new things popping up. Also in relationship to, say, digital broadly over the last decades. And there have been many points that it's a revolution. It's a revolution. So we have seen perhaps claims of hundreds of revolutions. So there are advances in data generation, which perhaps we should put more emphasis on that as well. And it has something to do, of course, with AI, because there's also the massive amounts of inputs which are generated, new types of inputs, higher frequency, and so on. Where there is the computing power you already mentioned, which is a prerequisite for AI to have power as well. There has been a lot of progress in storage and a lot of progress in interconnection. And then, yeah, so there have been many specific developments. I mean, we have the mass production and use of PCs and laptops, then the development and commercialization of the World Wide Web, the mobile internet, smartphones becoming kind of general purpose devices. And then there are more specific things some people have been very enthusiastic about and claiming that they will change our lives, say digital learning tools, there's cloud storage and cloud computing, big advances in speech recognition, digital payments important in some areas. You have worked on the blockchain, so many people also say a blockchain is a revolution. There are ongoing developments in virtual reality and augmented reality. So there's so many things. Now, as economists, why should we look at AI? And is AI something really general purpose? And how general purpose is it?
Well, you use this term revolution, which normally, connotes a massive change, a thing that occurs that really changes a society or an economy or something like that. And a lot of the things that get declared revolutions get declared before they've done their revoluting. And so AI falls into that category right now. There's no AI revolution that has occurred, but if you take the trajectory, there is an AI revolution that may well occur. And the reason for that is that one is that the tools that we now have with regard to these advances in statistics have very wide applicability. That's why AI has been called a general purpose technology, and the term for that is like it has implications across many sectors, jobs, etc. And that certainly looks like it's the case. Sometimes people do studies and say, 80% of all jobs will be affected by AI, positively or negatively, but affected by it. So that's the general part of it. But the revolution part has to play itself out. We can now declare that the internet was a revolution. We can declare that mobile computing and all those things were revolutions because they've been successful, spread, and reshaped activity. AI, on the other hand, is really at its initial stages. For up until very recently, AI was mostly enhancing prediction where we already did prediction, fraud detection, translation, things like that. We're now starting to see AI-driven applications, things that we can do that we never thought a machine could do, and they're going into applications. And so one of that is the ChatGPT and those large language models. Another is all the AI that's getting packed into Apple's devices, in particular the Vision Pro that's coming out next year. So we see these applications, completely new things that we can do, but none of those are necessarily transformative. Transformation comes when we get such significant improvements in prediction that they're a reason to really change how we do things in a system level way. And we saw this happen before, with electricity. Electricity was a new power source. It was a competitor for steam power. Steam power was very good at what it did. If you built your factory next to a good water source, steam power was perfectly fine. And electricity initially didn't seem to offer that many advantages. But that was because they hadn't really worked out what the difference between electricity and steam power was. And it really was that in electricity, you could transport it, whereas steam power could not be transported. So electricity, you could decouple the source of where you generated the electricity from where you actually used it. And that changed the sorts of land and other things that you could do this on. You could redesign factories. And moreover, electricity also allowed you to control the use of electricity within a factory. We take for granted that we've got on-off switches for electricity, but when you were using steam, it was either everything on or everything off. So that's a very different design process. Now realizing all that and taking advantage of that and seeing its impact on the economy, that was 4 decades. 4 decades after Edison's light bulb could we have said that this was a revolution. That is not exactly a fast acting one. We've seen plenty of political revolutions that happen a lot quicker than that. And we do see other ones that are quicker than that. I think, internet and mobile telephony were quicker than the electricity. And so maybe the AI will be more on a par with that. But at the same time, is like we haven't seen, this great new system that's going to transform stuff because of AI. We haven't seen, the closest example we've got mobile phones of transforming an industry was ride sharing, Uber and Lyft and so on. That was all enabled by having a mobile phone and having a navigation device in your pocket. It's a little related to AI, but wasn't an AI thing. And that that took 5, 7, 8 years to happen, but it's happened. With respect to AI, we just don't know. We just don't know what's really going to be transformed, and there's a lot of hype around it about this could happen next. And really, when you do put on the normal economics lens to this stuff, that's not entirely clear. I think these things will come, but I don't know what they're going to be.
Oh, so I wanted to use you as a prediction machine. So I'm not sure how well it will work. At least, I mean, we record it and then we can compare it in a few years' time. So where do you see kind of use cases? It doesn't then need to be a revolution, but where you already see that AI is kind of going to have some impact. When you mentioned the kind of mobility stuff, I mean, in San Francisco and Singapore and some other places, we do have now self-driving cars where AI is a part of it,
Right.
and so is that an area where you see growth, or what is kind of the use case people talk about?
Well, so the self-driving car is an interesting one. Obviously there wasn't, cars seemed like something that could be self-driving for a long time because they're not that complicated a thing to imagine how you use one, which is why even though when you think about it, that's kind of crazy, given the power and life, danger of that technology. But nonetheless, we do that. And it really only advanced, AI started to really improve the abilities of cars to navigate the current, machine-driven cars to navigate the current urban and other environments that we had. And probably right now, depending on your view of it, those cars are on a par with most human drivers. So they're already at that stage of being able to do so. If we were to blow everything up now and rebuild it again, it's unlikely we would do so with human drivers, given the current technology that we have with AI. That said, where are these cars? Where is all this self-driving stuff happening? And there have been a few cities that have now, in California, that have now allowed self-driving taxis. Self-driving in the way you imagine it to be. You imagine it to be, you get in the taxi and it drives, and that's it. But, all of those ones have a human sitting somewhere remotely connected to deal with issues when they come up, because ultimately, you can have an automated process, but it's very, very hard to automate the exceptions, when you get into a slightly more complicated situation, such as you get into an accident or you get lost or whatever, and it's just on what they call the edge cases of any training that occurs. And so you've got people to deal with that. That's why and you have to have that, mainly because often a self-driving taxi is driving around without somebody in there. Somebody to deal with a situation that comes up. So you need to have some sort of supervision for those situations. And it's not 100% clear that we're going to get with the current technology to the sort of full self-driving capabilities that they were optimistic about just 5 years ago. Very optimistic. They predicted we would have this in 2019. Early enough for us to start thinking, I wonder if our children have to get driver's licenses and things like that. And that's turned out not to be the case. And we're in 2023, and I don't think anyone is thinking we're going to have ubiquitous self-driving vehicles anytime soon. So that's one of those cases where the trajectory is great, but the capabilities of a statistically based system were not enough to get us all the way there, because one of the issues with statistically based systems is there's errors. And one of the things that we can do that is harder for machines to do is we can look at, oh, look, there seems to be a new novel odd situation here. Well, we can work out how to muddle through it.
Well, I guess at some point, perhaps also it's a matter of how much intervention is needed. So in the end, if 99% of the time everything is automated, then there is this residual there, but in terms of, say, number of jobs involved, so there won't be that many taxi drivers if you just have some kind of supervision still for a system. So in terms of for the people in the taxi profession, your distinction that it's not fully self-driving doesn't really matter, because they might be in a way out.
Oh, no, that's true. So we could have something that is hybrid doing that. But if you take it to taxi driving is one thing. The real drivers are driving trucks, right? That's the biggest employment class that was supposed to be, on the verge of getting wiped out by self-driving capabilities. Has that happened? No. But part of the reason that, I think AI will help that. It'll help people drive more safely and help with some things to do with fatigue and other things like that. So it'll be assistive. How many jobs is it going to replace? Well, that's hard to say, because if you imagine for a second trying to send a truck driving across the country without any human in it right there, you all of a sudden realize the human just wasn't doing driving. The human was there to, for instance, protect the truck. We're gonna if we have anything self-driving, I can tell you that from a regulatory standpoint, if there's a human in your way, it will not drive over that human. It may drive around that human if possible, but if there isn't a possible way, the truck will stop. And think about that from a security point of view. How easy would it be to hold up a self-driving truck and be able to access its load and rob it? All you have to do is stand in front of it. And it won't go anywhere.
No, but I guess there the point is, again, as you were saying, some kind of hybrid mode. So you have 20 trucks driving one behind the other. Yes. You have two people sitting in there. They will parked in a way that only the last one in a way is accessible. And yeah, so you can imagine that's okay. You reduce the amount of truck drivers by a large amount, and many of the things which was truck driving, most of that will be gone.
But think about the equilibrium effects of that. The equilibrium effects are on the big, long routes between the cities. We might have these chains of trucks. But what that's done is a big productivity increase, so we're more willing to ship stuff. But ultimately, the stuff has to get deep within a city, where you can't use that model, where you don't get those advantages of scale. At those levels, you'll have more drivers. At those levels, the return to having an automated thing go way down. And also the risks associated with that in terms of the desirability of the job go down as well. So you can imagine these drivers who were previously, there's mix of drivers previously doing long haul roads would go down in favor of more drivers doing all the short, within city stuff. So, I mean, it's not, wiping out a job is really hard to do. I mean, I can tell you, yes, almost certainly, a lot of the jobs of translators and things like that, maybe that'll get fully, cause a reduction in it. But it's very, very hard to actually wipe out full jobs. It's, they tend to get reconstituted. And I think you see the same things going on here.
I guess one interesting discussion around the kind of labor market effects of AI is that it's possibly less clear than with some other technological advances is who will be hit. So the two examples we're discussing now, it's arguably these are not jobs where you need a lot of human capital to build up to be, say, a taxi driver. But then there are other activities where possibly AI could play a role, lead to a huge productivity boost, probably not completely replace them, but may, for the same volume at least, require much less human labor, as we have in many other parts of the Industrial Revolution seen. But this may possibly affect activities which are highly remunerated and so far took a lot of training. If you think about, say, a combination of AI with robotics in surgery, or say also translation services and other elements.
Yeah, it's very funny, isn't it? So when you think about it for a second, what we're saying is AI is going to come in, and therefore the accumulated human capital of some people is not going to be as valuable. It's not going to be as valuable. And it's funny that sort of comes up, oh, that's an economic concern. Because I don't know, call me crazy, but if economists are going to be celebrating anything, it's going to be that we've got reduced scarcity. And so, am I just frozen?
But I can hear you well.
Oh yeah, I don't know why I've frozen. That's an odd thing to have happen in this day and age. Let me stop my video and start it again. That might be better. It's weird. Can you see me now talking?
Works well, yes.
Oh, okay. I prefer to be animated than non-animated. AI will fix this problem. We won't even notice. they'll fill in the gap. So no, it's a bit odd, right? We normally should celebrate things being less scarce. And, you know, the idea that, you know, human capital is not needed as much to get stuff done, you know, really means that more people can do stuff. Now, I know that that means that if you've previously, like the taxi drivers, benefited from some sort of a less scarce position, that doesn't sound like great news. But from an economy-wide point of view, we've had an increase in productivity, expansion in our ability to leverage the scarce resources we do have, that is people. And so that should, at our first pass, be seen as a good thing, and you know, and can open up markets and jobs and other tasks to a greater number of people. And so that is potentially good. Now, I don't think it's going to end there. I think there are other skills that will become relatively more valuable. You know, one of the reasons our skills as an economist are not valuable enough is that we have to spend a lot of our time doing things that are not applying those skills, or are applying those skills, but it's not great. But our skills, the things that we actually think are valuable, if we actually have more time to do them, they actually become relatively more valuable as well. So, you know, I think I see, you know, as usual, I basically see anything that is expanding productivity and supply, we should at a first order celebrate, and then we can work out this other stuff.
So I think connected to that is, I mean, we talked about two examples, but I think in health and in other areas, you can think the same thing, is that certain abilities become in a way more scalable, as we have seen with other parts as well. But I think AI may contribute to that. And that means I think some questions are interesting, perhaps less to the general public, but to the economists. So one question I would have is, what are your thoughts about how AI can possibly affect the scope of the firm? I mean, so we have the theory of the firm. We talk about the limited scope of managers. So with AI tools, possibly their scope can be increased, but is that something you would expect to happen, or it's just a possibility?
You know, I can see why one would argue that it would increase. Why? Because one of the reasons why we have limited scope is because we need managers to manage things, and our ability to manage is limited by our attention and information and what have you. So if you have AI processes that can more easily determine what's going on in an organization, surely you don't need as many managers for the same number of people. So it's an increase in that productivity, says maybe we don't need as much of that. But then again, we start to wonder things might change. You know, if at the same time you're deepening the knowledge and other things of what an organization is doing, it may be that when we look at the organizations of the future, they're not sort of this like highly centralized organizations that would come from an increase in scope, but actually are able to operate at a more narrowly focused way, that because the degree of specialization within the organization, broadly speaking, has increased as a result of this. So it's very, very hard to do that. In fact, I mean, that organization one has been going back years. I got this book by Herbert Simon called The Shape of Automation for Men and Management. And it was really interesting because that's what he was thinking about. And this was back in I'll get you the exact date, like 1965. This is an old book. And, you know, he saw, you know, automation was happening, but automation could happen for these managerial processes, and was trying to think about what that would all mean. And I think they did this with respect to information technology and all sorts of other things that were occurring in that regard. And it's been very, very hard to predict what happens to the organizations. I mean, in many respects, we've got part of the prediction. We've got these organizations that supply products to billions of people that have very few people working for it. The amount of the ratio of output per employee is very, very high indeed. But we didn't get these big organizations, these massive ones that accumulated power across multiple sectors that was predicted by that. The stock standard manufacturing organizations and stuff like that seem like relatively contained. So it's been very, very hard to work out what happens to these societies with technology in that same way. I must admit, it doesn't seem to play out the same way as we always expect.
So, Joshua, you're chief economist of the Creative Destruction Lab. So I guess some of those activities are probably also AI related. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit of who is playing there and what your role is, and then perhaps zoom in a little bit on what that can tell us about the development of AI?
Yeah, so the Creative Destruction Lab, this is how I got into AI, actually, how I first heard about it. It's been going in Toronto since 2012, and it's a seed stage startup development program. It has a lot of unique features, but the upshot of it is that it's grown from one site in Toronto to now 13 sites around the world, including there's one in Berlin. That was opened a year or so ago, in Europe now, and it now sees hundreds of startups a year, and those startups have been they're mostly science-based to some degree, and they've generated a very large amount of equity value, 28 billion at last count. So that's a lot, and early in the piece, in a couple of years, we started to see these startups about 2013 that were utilizing what they called artificial intelligence. And that's when we started to look at this. And then we saw that there was the machine learning, deep learning, reinforcement learning revolutions in play right here at the University of Toronto. And startups were leveraging that to do various things. And so that's why we became interested in trying to work out the economics of this thing. So it's really funny to fast forward a decade later, and the discussion about the artificial intelligence we were seeing is now being discussed as this thing that we might have to regulate, and it's going too fast and all that sort of going on, because most of the applications that we've seen have been firstly very exciting, secondly very innocuous. A lot of those applications were to do with things in the health domain, the ability to more accurately diagnose health issues and things like that has been phenomenal. The ability to provide tools that will assist surgeons. I mean, the AI, think about what a brain surgeon is doing. A brain surgeon is not, we tend to think of brain surgeons as really smart because they're dealing with the brain. Except they're not really, they don't really know very much. The brain is just a lump of meat to them. And the idea of a brain surgeon is to be able to go into that lump of meat and not do too much damage while trying to help with whatever problem they're guessing is the issue. And so you're trying to remove, for instance, cancerous tissue from a brain. And some of that you can see, but with cancer, there's cancer cells. So what a brain surgeon would have to do is sort of try and limit the amount of extra brain tissue they remove if they're removing a tumor. And of course, they're really just guessing at that, how many millimeters or worse do I have to extract, and hoping it will not do too much damage. Well, now you've got these AI tools, and the AI tools are able, while you're already in open brain surgery, to be able to look and tell you, they're like a microscope working in real time, whether there's cancer cells, cancerous tissue present. So you've removed the tumor, and now you're looking around it. And it's able to do that with a very high degree of accuracy. Nothing's perfect, but that changes the trade-off. Now you can use that tool and more likely only remove the tissue that ought to be removed, as opposed to taking some precautionary extra mileage out of it. And so those sorts of applications, have huge benefits, change the techniques and change how you would. And we're seeing tons of those things, and the main barriers to adoption of those things are regulatory, especially as we try to do things that involve more personalized medicine, which requires more personal data, etc., like that. And there are all manner of laws and other things regarding the retaining of and gathering of personal data. But those are the barriers that are being faced. But the prospects are huge, and so we've seen that in just a number of areas. And to me, it's very surprising at the same time to see there's so much fear being put out there in society, because most of the AI applications that are really doing anything are overwhelmingly good.
That's at least those which you're seeing at your lab, right? So
Well,
we're not sure about a few other parts of this world where the balance might be slightly less benign, but yeah. So for the commercial use, what you're saying is the applications you're seeing is typically these are things which are solving problems which may be health related, but of course there are other areas as well.
Stuff, yeah.
And what we're also seeing is that some AI startups, so less probably those, some using AI, but also some developing AI, end up with somebody else. I mean, the mergers are a natural thing of reshaping industries. So has been a lot of reporting that big tech is buying up AI firms, but it's not just big tech. It's essentially any kind of firms with a potential interest in AI is buying up. So can you tell us a bit about the experience of the startups you have been working with? So did a number of them end up being bought by large companies, or how has been the typical trajectory, apart from those who just stopped at some point?
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, I don't have any statistics from our. We've got hundreds of startups. That would be an interesting statistic to gather. But the acquisitions have not been that much. Firms are staying surprisingly independent for a good amount of time. Now, there are strategic corporate investments taking place in a lot of these. There's no doubt about that. And there is the big effect of big tech on these companies is, of course, the cost of labor and talent and stuff to be able to do these things is phenomenally high at the moment. Fortunately, what startups offer is this sort of a non-corporate work environment, which is very appealing to a lot of skilled people. But that's been the main effect. There are massive AI teams in all the big tech companies, not surprisingly. Interestingly enough, the biggest, AI, or the most well-known AI company out there, OpenAI, is a new entrant. Now, it does have a relationship with Microsoft, but nonetheless, it was a new entrant. And so you look at that and you think, well, it's not obvious to me that this is all falling big tech's way. big tech is showing interest in it, but it's not obvious that it's all going to fall their way. And in fact, the stuff that they're providing is mainly in competition, potentially with each other, and for the most commodifiable parts of AI. So I don't necessarily see. I see a very healthy startup ecosystem, and I think the opportunities for people doing AI startups are as great as they've ever been.
So what is the so how do you see the activities by, say, some of the tech companies? Although the question is, do we need to call them tech companies? For example, if one reads about Amazon, I mean, it's perhaps as much a logistics firm as it is just a tech player, so that they kind of intend at least to use AI and self-driving machines in their warehousings, and so that would be kind of to improve internally their processes, providing probably more reliable, even more reliable and quicker delivery. So is that something where, and this is something, I guess, which is not really related to tech. That's why I was mentioning the logistics part.
Yeah.
So which could play a huge role in other parts, say about port management or other logistics parts. So
Right.
is that something where you see scale?
So I think that's something where I see that someone's going to have to come up with new systems. And the reason is this: that even Amazon's warehouses, my understanding of it is, they have a lot of automation in them. There's no doubt about that. They've got a lot of things that are AI driven to some degree. They got that, you can see these videos of little robots running around and with whole stacks of stuff on top of them moving into place. But at the heart of that, it's not like modern AI. It's like it's a different sort of thing, because they're all still going on pre-specified grid tracks and things like that. The promise of modern AI is that things could just move autonomously themselves with some degree of agency. But Amazon's hasn't built that logistics system for that. It's built a highly modular system. And the thing about a modular system is you want the modules to behave well. Well, I've already told you that AI is a statistical process, which means that whenever you implement it to one of these things, you've got to have some sort of tolerance for some error. Within a module, you could do that. But between modules, that's a whole other story. And logistics is all about what you do between the modules. And so the ability to use AI Amazon's able to use AI fruitfully within the modules. But if it's going to, eventually that runs out in terms of what improvements you can get. And so the question is, are there opportunities for reconstituting how the whole structure of the thing based on AI? I don't think there's any AI in any domain that Amazon cares about that's good enough yet to warrant that change. In other words, that Amazon's current approach to doing things is probably going to be the dominant one for quite some time yet. But and the ability to use AI is not a piecemeal one. It's if you really want to get a sea change in Amazon's cost of logistics, and if AI is going to do it, it's going to have to do it in some completely new way that I don't even know what the principles of it are to do. And so I think this is why a lot of companies have found that the productivity gains from AI have not been as spectacular as they thought. The exception now seems to be the large language models. We've already had studies in the past year that have shown, for instance, the computer programmers are getting 50% increases in productivity, being able to use a GitHub Copilot or something like that. 50%. That's 50% in service industries. We never measure, you can't even measure increases in productivity in service industries, but that's what we're getting. And so you look at that and you say, well, this is good. I mean, like 5 years ago, we were all being told we need to teach our kids to code, learn to code, right? It seems like that would have been wasted time. Understanding what code is and having some feel for it is good, but learning to code per se, it looks like the machines are going to be able to do most of the basic tasks there. So it's amazing how those sorts of things are changing. And so that's where we're seeing the real transformation. And that's not an issue that's specific to Amazon or anywhere else. In fact, you've already got a large code base. The last thing you necessarily want is a whole lot of people using AI-based tools rather than the standing operating procedures for writing code in those circumstances, at least right now. Yeah.
So I mean, we are both at the university, and so possibly there are also use cases for us. So I guess a dream would be we put an exam, we have some kind of suggested solution, perhaps even without it, just the questions, and then we have a system which is doing the grading for us. We fix some parameters. At the beginning, we might still take a look at what what has been done, but at some point it looks so good, it might be almost fully delegated. Is that something we can hope for?
No, I think you can not only hope for it, I think it's here for a lot of stuff. I mean, it's a little bit of a ways for some of a little bit of ways. It's a couple of years away for quantitative exams. But qualitative ones and grading that, it's there. I think we're going to have to think through that process as well. So grading the majority of exams is going to be very easy. If you still have an interest in finding out who the really good students are, that's going to be a bit harder to do. Maybe we won't bother doing that anymore, or we'll find some other way to do it. I don't know. But already, I've delegated, I've managed to have completely automated all my response to student questions about the actual content of the courses I teach. That is, Kevin Bryan, my colleague here at the University of Toronto, worked out a few months ago that he could train ChatGPT or GPT, OpenAI type things, to be able to answer questions about my textbook and lectures. So if you imagine you've got several textbooks, Martin, you can take the original files from that. You can upload it into this thing. It'll be in a couple of months. You'll be able to do it. We'll send you the link, and then you can, in natural language and any language you want, could be English, could be German, ask questions of it, of that material, and you'll be able to get answers. And I would say that it can answer the vast majority of questions that come from students. Even ones that you got every year that were sometimes more nuanced and required a more nuanced answer, and answer them accurately as well. That's not an issue. I implemented this in my course the last semester, and I used to get 2 or 3 emails a week from students. Last semester I got 0. None, not one. No one asked me to clarify, because they had access to this thing and they could ask it questions and have a conversation with it whenever they wanted. So no one's emailing me after they can do that.
Are you planning to substitute your lecture then? Say just ask any question.
Well, that's an interesting thing of whether you should do that. I mean, like I don't know how this does the same mode of teaching. What's the point of the lecture? Is a good question there. I mean, the incentive for a student to stick through it is much higher if they know there's this thing that can answer questions and develop understanding. So I think there is that option for scale in a pretty interesting way. And I think, what the student is getting from that is not just, oh, well, the student's just getting what you give them. No, they're getting much more than that, because it turned out they are able to ask this thing questions all the time. So they're going to ask it more questions than they ever asked me. They're not afraid to ask this stupid questions either. when you think about it. They're just struggling with understanding, and then they get a thing and they get an answer. So, you know, it's really it really will change. It really has that potential to change how a lot of people learn, much the same way the internet has changed how students learn, again, given compared with our day, right? When we were students. So I think this is going to have that effect, and that effect is coming very, very quickly. You know, our intention is that this virtual TA, we call it the all-day TA tool, we'll give to everybody to be able to use. There's an issue, you know, you and I have our own textbooks, so it's very easy to upload it into it. I don't know what's going to happen for people who don't have their own textbooks, what the copyright situation is there on that sort of stuff. But you can imagine that publishers will launch this with their textbook. You adopt their textbook, they'll provide this with it, and then, you know, I don't know what we're actually doing, but it's fine, because so long as we have to, the one thing we have to keep as academics is the final grades and sign off has to be our right. So long as that's the case, it doesn't matter other than that.
I have a question here in that context, so so we can answer the questions to students, and so that people can educate themselves, essentially, using this. So to what extent then, I guess that's an ever always repeated question, which you could have asked in the past. I mean, so what's the role for exams, I guess? And so the point is, well, why do you need to ask these questions if it's so easy to get the answer in any case?
Yeah, well, that was, you know, exams are you know, exams exist because there's an inefficiency. Right. Thomas Jefferson, when he set up the University of Virginia, wasn't going to have any assessment. That didn't work out very well. Because you know, you should come. You want to learn. I mean, what do I care? I'll provide you the learning and the tools and blah blah blah. But it seems that students need assessment. Students need assessment to motivate them, and then there's this other issue that people who are hiring students or whatever the use they're doing need some way of working out if they know what they're doing, if they know something or not. But when you think about it, you know, a lot of firms put students through a lot of interviews now to determine that. And what's that telling you? That's telling you that whatever exam results we were getting, we'd give them some sort of signal of who to interview. But what they really want the students to know and to be able to do, they have to test themselves. So there is a world in which we provide all these tools and these abilities and things like that. And we say basically, well, we're not your HR department. That is a service that you should do. You'll have to do yourself. And that all the exams are done as part of the hiring process. I'm not saying that that would be good for everything, but there's something that makes sense about that process. You know, rather than you're setting an exam for students, they know your material, and then they're being hired by someone who's going to use some of your material for their own purposes, of which you don't train them for. That's weird. Isn't it? It's weird. It doesn't seem efficient to me. You know that when we look at our education system and our own jobs here, that, you know, we can tell a story that maybe it makes sense, but it doesn't. How can it make sense?
Okay, let's kind of.
I'm just saying.
I'm seeing the time is moving, so let me, since we're also still in the academic part, and I think that applies not just for academic work, but possibly also other areas, that in a way we can reuse. I mean, part of that you were mentioning with the textbooks, we can reuse material. So for example, I don't know, we have written something, then we want to have a blog entry, or you want to have some executive summary. Of course, that's something we will probably still check and read for the time being, at least. But there, it seems that we can kind of have versions of what we created and cater it to specific audiences without much effort. Is that also your perception?
That's 100% the case. That's for sure we can do that. And you're right, we still have to check it, but that's different from having to write it in the first place. And it will be better, and it will be clearer. Our abstracts will be clearer, our introductions will be clearer, all those sorts of things. Sort of sameness to it all. It's not going to be as interesting as it used to be, but that's a, that's a different thing. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. Imagine taking one of your papers and saying, to the AI, read this paper. They make this assumption that, demand is blah, blah, blah. Can you check what happens if demand is this form? Output's the answer. Something that you do when you're researching all the time, but it might take you days to understand the paper, to see what the thing is. And
well, you're optimistic, yeah, but okay,
yeah.
suppose it's only days, yeah.
That is for me with my AI, my already existing secret AI robots here doing all this stuff. No, I agree. It can take a long, it takes a long time. But you can imagine, just think about what that AI tool, that doesn't feel right now. I mean, if you asked me a year ago, I would have said that seems way off. But now it doesn't feel way off at all. It feels in a number of years. And so that's really going to change things. In terms of the production of theory, the production of papers, and how we present it, and how we use it, and how we read it, and what we can make use of a paper. Most of these papers are fairly useless to us. We've now been chopping them down to 30 pages and then a 100-page online appendix if you really need to understand anything. It's getting really difficult, but I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility that AI will be able to assist so much in that and dramatically improve our productivity in absorbing research or building off of it.
That's great. It's very nice to talk to you, because you still have an optimistic view of the world, and that's very good. You also mentioned possibly the risk that there's too much regulation. As you know, in Europe, we are talking about regulating AI. Probably also agree that certain things have to be clarified. For example, something I've been thinking a little bit about is liability. So in an AI context, it is very important to clarify where the liability is, and you cannot just leave it open. And of course, choices have to be made. So there is definitely things on the policy agenda which has to be addressed. And if it's not addressed, it's even more problematic, because then you don't provide guidance to the courts, and that might be probably more difficult. Now, I think what I still need is some guidance for our listeners. So I was showing the first book, The Prediction Machine, and then there's the other book, which you're now just catching, which is Power and Prediction. Which one should the interested reader look at first? And is that enough, or is it really to go to both?
It's really hard to say. Power and Prediction is, in our minds at least, a sequel to Prediction Machines. At the same time, we actually updated and have a second and updated and expanded edition of Prediction Machines that we did at the same time as Power and Prediction. It kind of depends what you're interested in. I suspect for the more economically interested audience, the stuff in Prediction Machines is fairly basic. It's designed to help the perplexed business manager know what to do next Monday with regard to AI. Whereas Power and Prediction is really thinking about these sort of longer term things of transformation and other things as best we can, given we don't know what's going on for that. So it really depends on your interest level. I mean, there is that volume of the Economics of Artificial Intelligence that we wrote, which was of interest to researchers. The whole point of that 5 years ago was to hold a conference with you know, the best economists in the world who have never thought a thing about AI and say, think. What do you think of the interesting research questions? And that's still very relevant today.
Okay, and how much I mean, since it's especially the first book, as you said, it's more written for these business people, where sometimes, of course, it doesn't apply to this book, but some other books, perhaps with that audience in mind, that you wonder why there are so many pages where the message could be kind of condensed to
Yes.
2 or 3 pages, where AI actually may help us to get there.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, I read it and it is written in a nice way, but I don't think you can compress that one to 2 or 3 pages.
No.
In general, what do you think in terms of the I mean, the incentives of writing books, if then in the end people want to have a summary which will be easier to get and perhaps maybe pretty informative? So
You know,
why
I think
first to expand in order
yeah.
for most of the audience than actually just getting the condensed version?
Well, from my perspective, you still have to read the book in order for some AI to summarize, or still have to write the book for an AI to summarize it. So there's that. So it's not like it's taken away that task. I think, this always depends on everybody's own views of that. I think we will be summarizing rather than reading, and not necessarily books where you are trying to sort of observe in a sort of time space an argument going across, but we'll be summarizing a lot of things now. I already have a little thing that summarizes websites before I have to scroll down and things like that. We always have to filter the information and spend our time best. We try to write the book in an accessible and fun way, so maybe you enjoy reading it just for its pleasure.
No, exactly. That was the fun part. I mean, we can get also summaries of novels, but it's still different if we read the novel or if we read a summary of the novel, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay.
But our textbooks and stuff like that, which can be a bit more dense, I think people will ask questions of them first before delving into the chapter.
Joshua, this has been a very quick hour, at least on my side, and I hope that our audience enjoyed this conversation as well. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
A pleasure.